Hi, hi everyone. How are you today? Welcome to room 3 again. I hope you're still excited for day 2 of PyCon ID 2020. Back with me again, Lita, as the moderator for this session. So, we have Ing Wei Tang or James as the speaker. Hi, James. Can you
Hello.
hear my voice?
Hello. Yes, I can hear loud and clear.
Okay. I heard you can speak 5 different languages, right?
Yes, and additional on that, I do understand Bahasa Indonesia as well.
Oh,
So I I
bahasa. You can speak
I
bahasa.
I can speak a little bit, but mainly I speak in Malaysia. We speak Bahasa Malaysia over here, but I
Hmm.
do understand Bahasa Indonesia as well.
Okay. Wow, it's so great. Okay, I will read
Yeah,
your short profile first. Okay.
sure.
Uh, James is the chair for PyCon Malaysia 2019 and the co-chair of PyCon 2018. Wow, and president of MyPOP. He has spoken in various PyCons, particularly in PyCon APAC 2013, right?
2018.
2018.
Yeah,
Okay, my bad. I'm so sorry for that.
that's okay.
Okay, and this session, James will talk about what. Wait, I repeat. In this session, James will deliver talk about what I've learned in building a production website that serves PyCon APAC 2020 within 4 days. Right, James?
Okay. Hi guys. Thanks for the session, and thanks Nina for the moderator. In fact, this is my second time speaking at PyCon Indonesia. The first time was PyCon Indonesia at 2017. So the topic that I have today will be a sharing topic on how actually I built a production server that served PyCon APAC 2020 recently. So I put the link for that webpage. If you're interested, you can visit on that. And one thing about that website is it's running on Python and is currently still safe, alive, I would say. And it's been more than 2 months by now. Wow, something that I'm very proud of is whenever somebody do a vulnerability scanning, is still safe. So that is something that I'm proud with. So a little bit about myself. Okay, as I mentioned that I've been speaking, I have spoken in PyCon Indonesia before, which is on 2017. So it's a great honor to be back again to speak at that. And also the moderator, I mentioned that has been in PyCon Malaysia for years. Yes, I've served in PyCon Malaysia since 2017 until now, and we have just finished PyCon APAC 2020. As a daily job, I'm a senior automation engineer in one of the insurance firms, and I do have several self-initial projects in GitHub. So if you would like to know what's my project about, you can check out my GitHub later on the link. A little bit about PyCon APAC 2020. For PyCon APAC 2020 is a very interesting and very unique PyCon for this year because of COVID-19. So turned out to be this PyCon APAC 2020 is a first online conference, and it's a first online conference that we have never hosted before. PyCon APAC 2020 consists of 2 weekends in September 2020, which is 12, 13, 12 to 13, 19 to 20 September 2020. We have about 180 participants. Not too sure whether we have initial participants, but probably we have. Okay. So what we have in the events will be talks, interviews, and we have quite numbers of interesting panel section as well as tutorials. Okay, so I think for those who have been in PyCon in APAC 2020, I believe that you have enjoyed the session. Now, the talk for today is about, as I mentioned before, is a sharing session. It's a sharing session that what we have learned throughout the failure in PyCon APAC 2020. Okay, it's also a kind of sharing that we hope we can benefit others in the future. For example, building out a production server in a short time, it is not an easy task, but rather I hope we can do it we can use that as an opportunity in the future, and as well as hope that our talk can help others who are in the same difficulties as we do. And back again, what is https live.pycon.my? Live.pycon.my actually is a project that we like to run because we want to keep the exclusiveness of the PyCon APAC 2020. When we mention about exclusiveness, it means that we want to keep the content, streaming content that runs only for the attendees during the conference day. It also means that we would like to add this as a personalized web app that will help and that serve attendees for PyCon APAC 2020, and possibly that will be a web app for PyCon MY in the future. At the same time, we also would like to use this opportunity to try out and experience some of the features for the new webpage for PyCon MY. So this is why we started this, and then we like to see, because one thing that we have foreseen that maybe in several years from now, COVID-19 will not be away in a short time. So we like to take this opportunity to run several experiments on this platform so that we know what kind of things that we can build and what kind of things that we can experience on this thing. So back to like what we mentioned before, why we need that. So exclusive is one of it. And at the same time, something that I forgot to mention is we like to run the event live on the live.pycon.my. And as I mentioned before, we like to have something that is personalized, which personalized service over here will include event notifications, streaming, as well as ticket validation. A little bit of note of what the architectures of live.pycon.my that we have. So live.pycon.my actually is something that is really easy and simple. It consists of one compute engine that runs on the Google Cloud, as well as several web app. In this case, we choose to use FLASK web app, and we have several the workers of the FLASK web app. Together, it will talk to another compute engine that contains MySQL. Here, I can't find the icons for the MySQL, so I use a Cloud SQL over there. But eventually, it's still a PyCon. No, eventually it's still a MySQL compute engine on this part from that. So pretty simple architectures that we have on that. So back to the question that we mentioned over there, perhaps you might ask why we use Flask and not Django. So let me use a little bit time to explain on this matter over here. Now, during that 4 days, actually a lot of things came to my mind. So Django and Flask is one thing that I put into the consideration during that 4 days. So firstly, Django has been something that I'm interested. I would like to learn it. But during that 4 days, looking at it, when I try to start with the Django project from that, I find that the learning curves is too high for me. Not to mention that as during my introduction, we have the back end build, no, front end built by the previous web uh, team lead, but I have some difficulties on attaching those front end into the Django controllers. So I've been thinking about it. Is it possible for me to build an app from Django? So after thinking a very took quite a long thinking about that, I decided to go to Flask. Why I'm choosing Flask eventually? Because Flask is something that I really familiar with. I have built several web API as well as the web app using Flask. And when I look at the code base from the front end, which is using a Bootstrap and JavaScript and the HTML, I feel confident that I can put my back end easily through the front end. Therefore, I'm very confident in building out this web app within 2 days and then get tested with that next 2 days. So back to what we have experienced before COVID-19. This is what we have in 2019. And normally when we check the tickets for the attendees, it will be through the counters, the ticketing counters, or the ticketing booth at the venue itself. So this is how we did it, and we have several attendees from PyCon Indonesia, and I remember quite numbers of it, and I think they are very experienced with this situation. But however, during the COVID period, it is very difficult. It is impossible, I would say, not just difficult, for us to do a check-in. But when I look at PyCon ID this year, it looks interesting that when where you guys use the hoping on that, so probably that's something that we can learn from that. So we find that it is impossible for us to do a ticketing validation. So we decided to come up with one thing. We say, okay, is it possible for us to do a middleware? And the purpose of the middleware simple, we like to just to know whether the if somebody bought the ticket has turned out on the event, and also we like to take the opportunity for to use this ticket as an identification for that. Now, when you ask about validation on that, so probably you will say, oh, okay, why? And okay, sorry. So this is one thing that we have for the middleware. You you input the username and password, validate tickets. Once success, you go to live.pycon.my, and then if not success, go to the ticketing page. So as simple as that. So this is the uh, structures that we wrote for the PTX, not P, sorry, PTX, ticket checking, and it is quite a simple one together with the handlers that we have at the back end. So it helps. This is how it works. So first thing, it checks the username, then it goes to the middleware to check whether you have bought the tickets, and then it goes log into the page, and probably you see that in the demo later. So people might ask, most of our ticketing companies will provide with the API that allows you to fetch the users info or users purchase status or everything. Why we have to build a middleware out of it? Okay, now the ticketing company that we use and we have been using quite numbers of years, sadly we found that it does not provide any API that allows you to that allows us to fetch the users. So in this case, for the flow charts that you've seen just now, actually we have to do a lot of manual work at the back. We have to update the users manually into our database, and then we have to check the ticket, okay, load that, everything. So because of a lot of manual works, we found that we have missed a few attendees who bought the tickets at very last minute, and it caused quite a big issues to us, which means it called a we have potentially missed the attendees loading that into a database. So it caused quite a number of problems to us, and definitely would like to see whether we can change next year. So next thing that we like to choose from that is we like to choose on the WSGI web server gateway interface. Now, of course, there's two different kinds of web server gate interface that we can choose. One will be the GUNICORN or UWSGI. Okay, so what makes us to choose from one over each other? So before we started to choose anything, we start to look at what's the difference between. Obviously, according to the reference that we have down there, it shows that actually UWSGI is faster because it has a shorter response time, but during our setup within 4 days, a lot of decision has to be made. So when we try out something, we find that we will prefer GUNICORN over UWSGI. Reason for that is GUNICORN is something that uh, easy to set up. Of course, in this case, it is just based on our observation or opinion. So I hope that if you have something that is better, you can let me know about it. But during that 4 day times, we find that G Unicorn actually is easier. And of course, G Unicorn is much more popular than others UWSGI. However, perhaps you might argue that okay, UWSGI can serve more users than that, but for our consideration is that our PyCon has most 200 users, so the busiest load that probably we can get is about 200 users per second. Okay, so that is something that we like to consider. But of course, we like to give a try on UWSGS in the future when we have a bigger load on that. Okay, now of course, having to say that apart from the mentioned reasons over there, there's another reasons why we choose GUNICORN over UWSGS. Okay, and this is partly the reasons from that. So during the when we started with the dev, we have about one single track simple, which is one process and one track in our development. So things are there's a lot of interesting things that doesn't happen during the dev when we have just one process and one track over there. Okay, so simple, when you go and fetch something from the database, you get it back and it process. Now, when it comes to UAT, we have multi-track users under the GUNICORN. We have about 5 workers and then 2 tracks. Now, during the UAT, we found out there's a very interesting issues over there. We found out there's an error message that we do not know how to respond, which is the lost connection to MySQL server during the query, okay, for both UWSGI and GUNICORN, okay? And this is something that we have not experienced in depth. Simply, we do not know why. So one thing that makes the difference between dev and UAT is we have multi-threaded workers and single threaded from that. So if this is due to multi-threader from there, what could have gone wrong? Is it due to the race condition? Is it due to the other reasons in multi-threading? We do not know. So we decided to do some Googling. So some answers will say that because you have this situation, you should need more MySQL's connection. And some will say that, oh, okay, because this is a common issues for some of the WSGI, which is the WSGI has forked too many workers. And some would suggest that, saying that, okay, why don't you just try use GUNICORN for a database for CRUD? So this is also one of the reasons why we choose GUNICORN over that. So we have only about 36 hours left. So if this is an issue that we have to solve and it has to run in the production environment, how can we do that? So the only ways that we like to do that is, okay, we can do by something by reducing the workers and use a load balancers. So the common load balancers that we use, of course, we choose NGX, since it can run the SGI, as well as we can use the use NGX as the load balancer. So for the load balancers, of course, we keep it to be 2 workers. So we use less connected mechanisms, so that when there's one server that has a lot of load, we'll transfer the another load to another app from that. And of course, we group the web according to the different ports under the WSGI and run the web server. So pretty much quite simple. So what we hope over here is by using a load balancer over there, we can overcome the issues of what we had during the UAT, which is the lost connection queries to the MySQL server. Now, the clock is ticking, so we have to conduct our UAT test again. We have only 3 users. We tested UAT so far because we tested and then you find it's all good, everything is okay. But there's a problem with that. We don't have CA cert, CASSL cert, so no choice. We have to come out with self-signed certificates. And for those who have tried out the webpage at the last day of the day before the PyCon APAC 2020, probably you might have experienced that. And of course, thanks to one of our attendees, we managed to point our the live.pycon.my to our WordPress DNS, which we use to host the PyCon.my. So once we have that live.pycon.my pointed with our IP address of the web app, we can use Subbot to generate the TLS certificates. So everything right now tends to be secure and proper, and we have the web page and the web server running on production. And the time left after we have the work is about minus 12 hours before 12 September 2020. In order to prevent things happen during the day, because we know that there's an issue over there, we know that potentially it might things that break. So during that day, I'm responsible for a few roles over there. I was the system administrator, making sure that everything is running accordingly, check the logs, read the logs, and try to help the users, as well as I'm also the help desk replying the message from the Facebook, Twitter, as well as the email. And of course, we do have some users who bought the tickets in very last minute. So I had to come up with a script to enter the data into the database from that. And at the same time, I'm also a troubleshooter. So mini troubleshooter is whenever there's a ticket log or any message that comes to me says that there's a problem with the app, I'll go and troubleshoot and fix the thing on the same time. Now, even though things are in production right now, and we know that there's an issue, but there's an issue that we have never tested in UAT. The issue was something that we do not know why, and perhaps we know something that something happens, but we do not know how to explain that. Okay, so the issue is such: the users log in several times, okay, with the username and password correctly, but they never got login. So they have to try multiple times until they log in. So that is one of the issue over there. And another issue is when the users have checked in properly, they are not being direct to the middleware, but rather they are being directed to the ticket selling page. That's another issue. That's one issue. And another issue is there's few users couldn't log in as well, user as a username and password. So quite numbers of issue over there. So we do not know why. Probably we know it might be due to the multi-trading, maybe, but sadly we do not know why at during that time. So because of this, we received quite a nasty comments from one of the attendees about the web. So we are actually quite sad about it, even though we have spent quite numbers of effort building out this thing from there, but still we have this kind of comments from the attendees. So never mind, since there's a feedback from that and there's a setback from that, we learn from the setback. So when we receive the setback, there's few things that we have to reflect on this thing, which is first thing that I'm not an expert in building out the web app, so I have to admit that I do not know the subjects very well. Okay, so if I'm not do not know the subjects well, I need to find and talk to the experts that I trust. And as well as I need to be open to the critics and learn from the mistake that I have during this setback. But of course, we have to admit that not everything can be found from Google and just deploy it using cut and paste, even though there's a short time from that. So most likely, when I talk to the expert that I trust, the issue can be if there's a problem in the code base, we have to find the issue from the code, find the root cause, and then fix that. So I decided to talk to the expert that I trust, Kage Sensei, which you can reach in under this GitHub. So I say, oh, hey, Sensei, I have this problem that can you help me on that? So we decided to spend about 1.5 hours to deep dive to the app that I wrote for the PyCon APAC 2020 this time. And throughout this 1.5 hours over there, we find that there's an issue over in our app over there. It's a global synchrotons. Okay. And when I wrote this app, I didn't know that that was the issue that can cause such an outage for my app because short time, and this is something that I used to wrote for my FLASK web app and it doesn't run into problems. So I didn't really know that that's a global synchrotons from that. Okay, so if this is a global synchrotons from that, then there's an issue that it might not be able to identify the tracks that runs by the response from the front end because there's a multiple tracks running in the background. Meaning that let's say when NICE requests the data from track A, and that is something that received from the front end, but when the response is sent back to the app again, it might confuse that it might send to track B or workers B in this case. So it caused a confusion over there. Of course, in this case, it might not be able to update the database from that. So that's the issue with the web app over there. But of course, during my daily job from that is because I wrote a lot of the CRI-based script, and potentially I do not know from that. But what I have learned throughout this web app from that is in this situation, global singleton is a bad practice, and I should avoid that. Now, as a reflection from the code refactoring over there, what Kage Sensei mentioned that is perhaps you might want to consider of closing the connection with the database after I have retrieved the data from or into the database for this multi-threading application. Simply because when I retrieve the data and close that, it will not cause the issue for the track to confuse. So after that works of the a wise advice from the sensei, I decided to revisit the code and write a new HTTP handler that consists of all the CRUD operations between the endpoint and the database. Okay, so meaning that from there, for each endpoint of the process, including the middleware that handles the ticketing, it will have its own connection object to deal with the CRUD operations. And of course, once the CRUD operations has been completed, the connection will be terminated from that. So simple for that. So this is a very simple registration handler that I wrote for my app, and then I can use it to run that. So if you look at the code base itself, when I run the registration and get the registration, when it do a post, it write to the database, and once it's done with writing into the database, it will just uh, close the connection. So once I have done the uh, code refactoring, it works and it never got into issues for the next week of process the event, which is the 19th to 20 September. And was I'm so happy about that, and it never caused an issue anymore on that. So apart from that, we also like to share a little bit about the streaming platforms that we use from that. So we also using StreamYard together. Is we also stream our event to YouTube. But perhaps you say that, as I mentioned in the beginning, we try to build something that we want to live stream on live.pycon.my. We have tried, but we are not quite successful on that day, simply because we need to add the user's email into the allowed list. And like what I have mentioned before, uh, we do have some attendees bought the ticket at very last minute. So it costs us some issue on the operationals, because we cannot add the list into we cannot add the email into the allowed list at the very last minute from that. So this gives us difficulties in terms of streaming that. And also we found out that even though we have streamed the event on YouTube, it is very difficult for us to keep the exclusiveness. But having this website allows us to set a barrier so that we make the attendees to feel like, oh, okay, this event is good. And we also believe that one thing, that attendees will never share the YouTube links to those who have not bought tickets. So one thing as a reflection from what we think of from that is, perhaps we can develop a RTMP player to broadcast the live stream on our page in the future, which is kind of on our roadmap for the after we have the COVID from that. So a summaries of the technologies that what I know that used in various PyCon. So first thing, of course, the EuroPython and PyCon Hong Kong use the Zoom Live. And as well as PyCon US and PyCon Korea, they use the recording and broadcast it to the YouTube. And for PyCon ID and PyCon APAC 2020, we have StreamYard Live as well as the YouTube. And I just learned about that. Actually, there's another thing called hopping. So probably there's something that we can explore in the future. So as a conclusion, what have we learned from that for this PyCon APAC 2020? We have learned that yes, we cannot have a physical conference in uh, 2020, including a lot of quite numbers of conferences has been cancelled. But it doesn't mean that we are far apart from each other. We are still very close to each other. And for those who have joined the PyCon APAC 2020, you'll find that there's several community videos from PyCon Hong Kong, PyCon JP, PyCon Korea, PyCon Taiwan. We all have the videos. And thanks for all these communities that have shared the videos from that. And also, we have started to reflect that we need to build our infrastructures, including the software and the hardware, together with the organization to be agile and flexible in order to fit to the change, or rather to say, due to the rapid change of the pandemic. So meaning that in this case, whenever there's a change in the development pandemic, including the policy from the government, our structures or our organizations is flexible enough to adapt to the change that we have due to the certain change or emergency change of the pandemic. Now, there's also one thing that we have learned from that, and again, having this talk over there, PyCon ID also gave us quite a good ideas on how we can run the event. But of course, initially when we started PyCon APAC 2020, we learned quite numbers of things from EuroPython on how to run the events. And of course, I would like to thank all the PyCons organizers over there because we have learned quite a lot of things from each other. Again, the things that before I end, I'd like to thank those who have shared their expertise or helps in building up this web app within 4 days. Firstly, Chin Han, Chi Leong, Humi, Ivy, Jatro, Kake Sensei, Guan Li, and as well as we have our speaker in PyCon ID over here, Pratibha Jane over here, who is also a speaker in PyCon ID. So without their help, I think it is very difficult, or I think it will be impossible for us to build a web app within 4 days from that. So conclusion, we find that since there's a lot of change, there's a rapid change, and there's quite an uncertainty in during the COVID-19 period. Automation is certainly needed for our deployment. So we definitely would like to look at how we can put automation in the next deployment. And there's few things that we like to look into, which is the administrations, web app development, live streams, platform, as well as the task distribution from that. So it's not over yet, okay? But because we like to recruit some of the people to join us, is still volunteer works, but we like to have you guys to join us to have hand study and to build out some applications, because right now we are really short of people and we have quite a big roadmap and projects over there. So if you are interested, you can send me an email and let me know what you are in expert with. Okay, so for the demo, I would like to show you on the webpage of the PyCon live.pycon.my. That was me. Yes. So it's here. So this is the web page for PyCon MY, live.pycon.my. And from there, I'm using a test account. So once you log in with your username and password, if you have not registered, you go to this check-in web page. So by clicking this check-in over here, it shows that you have acknowledged that you have used a ticket. So once you have clicked that check-in, it will log in you to this page over here. So also we have the same few sponsors over here, and this is the introduction page with the speakers and the event on that. So once you click on the event, it shows the YouTube link of the event during that day. So I hope it's still working. Okay. Yep. So this is a simple web page that we have built within 4 days. Yep. Okay. And of course, as I mentioned, I hope to see we hope to get volunteers to help us to work together to build the next phase of the live.pycon.my. So any questions from the floor?
Hello, James.
Yep. Any questions?
Ah, yes. Any questions from participants? We can start.
Yep, sure.
From
Oh,
Jason Yapri, what are your views on the benefits of using Python web framework instead of PHP, which is Laravel, or JS, which is React JS or Angular frameworks?
okay. Well, I hold quite a neutral on this question, simply because I think for each framework, it has their own advantages over that. So for me, the reason for us to pick up the Python web framework over there is because I'm quite familiar with those. And not to mention that, of course, for the JS framework, I actually prefer the Vue frameworks over there. So I do build application as well. So to me, working out between the JS as well as the PHP, I did use PHP before for my daily job before. Okay, and for me, there is no so-called the advantage over one over the other one. So simply, I'll say pick up the tools that you like or maybe you are familiar with to build something that you have over there, because every tool it has their own advantages over that. So I won't say that there's one Python would be better than others or JS will be better than others, but I think they are in the equal footing on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Next question from Irfan
Well,
Putra. Will database polling works for multi-threaded application?
we have not tried it before, but if we do not know actually, we do not know. Maybe it works, but during that 4 days we actually think of this line. We'll just think of very simple CRUD operations where we fetch the data from the database and then present it, just a very simple the MVC models that we try to use. So we haven't actually did the database pooling. So thanks for the suggestion for this case. Perhaps we can look into the database pooling in this case. Any more
Uh,
questions?
okay, James. I don't see other questions, but
Yep.
maybe you can share your profile, maybe social media or something, so participants can reach out from
Yes.
after event.
I let me just write it here. Sorry, I forgot to put it here.
Okay.
Let me just put it here from here.
Yes.
Let me just edit in right now. So you can reach me at GitHub or as well as my email. So my email will be here as well as my GitHub. My GitHub is very same as the ID that I use. Yep. So these are the things from that I have. So you can reach out from there. So in this case, for PyCon MY, we do hope that we have uh, Pythonista can join us because we really short of the volunteers to work on the project on that. Even though we try to recruit, but we still need a lot of different the expertise to help us to build for the next phase of the web page from there. I mean, as I mentioned before in my introductions, I'm not quite an expert in building all the web app. What I have built is more on the hobby project for myself. But in terms of things running on production, I'm still kind of newbie in building the thing. So if you have something that to share with me, do reach out to me. And I do hope that by sharing this PyCon over there, this topic over there, I hope that I can use a little bit of my experience that I have learned during the session to help others as well. Okay, so this is kind of my note from that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, James, for your sharing. Maybe we can end this session, but before we end this session, maybe you want to say something for the participants here?
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
Listening you
I
now?
know it's a little bit kind of early. Yes, for the participants over there, okay. Um, PyCon Malaysia's okay, one thing that I actually wants to say about PyCon ID over there is we actually really thankful for PyCon Indonesia for supporting PyCon MY all the times, because over all these years we do have a lot of attendees from PyCon ID. Namely, we have I know a few of them. We know Rizky, we know Farah, we know Tega, we know Tony, Christophorus. Yes, I'm personally quite close to him. We check quite numbers of it, and a few others that I forgot the names, and as well as Entry, I think, and uh, I forgot the name for the speakers that we have yesterday. There's a few more the names that I know, and of course, throughout this session, even though we are not meeting each other physically, but get to know this time Sadia, Dima and Nita, of course, and I have Melissa as well, I think. So get to know new faces over there, and pretty much I'm very happy about that. Yeah, I'm very happy, truly very happy that to know quite numbers of you in PyCon ID. Feel very happy about that. So, oh yeah, forget about one names. I hope that he doesn't mind.
Yes.
Zaki Ahmad, yes, has been quite a close friend as well. Zaki Ahmad,
Mhm.
yeah. So I know few quite numbers of good friends in PyCon ID over there. So actually, I feel very thankful over this year's PyCon ID has been quite supportive to PyCon MY as well. So this is why I like to take my opportunity to thank PyCon ID for all this year, the support that we get from them.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you, James. Thank you
Thank you.
very much for
Thank you.
your amazing. And what do you say? Thank you in Bahasa.
Terima kasih.
Yes, thank you. Terima kasih juga, James.
Yeah, terima
See you
kasih.
and on
See
next
you.
event maybe ya.
See you on next event. Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you. Bye bye.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.